Hello everyone, Spencer here, and in this video I'm going to break down how Vonage would hire and pay their entry-level sales team. And by hire, I'm going to break down like the trainings that we went through. So if you can see behind me, I'm going to jump right into this screen here. This is Excel, good old faithful Excel spreadsheet that you've seen before, kind of restructured a little bit. But if you were just coming out of college with literally zero experience, we would hire you. It didn't matter the degree, as long as you graduated. That was a sign that you're somewhat of a go-getter, I guess. And we would hire you, and we'd give you a $50,000 base salary. I think it was between like $45,000 and $50,000. And for general rule of thumb here, your quota was $3,000. Now, part of that hiring process, right when we'd hire you, we'd send you out to Homedale, New Jersey, to the Vonage headquarters. And in the Vonage headquarters, we would give you a master class in training that was run by a number of individuals. You'd be out there for 7 days, and then we'd ship you back to your local office. And in that time, you'd have to like pitch to the CEO. You would meet members of the operations team. I mean, it was pretty impressive. I got to tell you, like the Vonage training, really good. And I'd been through a couple of trainings before. So I was really impressed with that. It's kind of worth going through. This is going to sound kind of shady, but if you were trying to hire a sales team, you should literally tell them to go apply to Vonage, get the training, and then pick them up because it was impressive. Alrighty, so looking at this, $50,000 with $3K quota. You might be thinking 50 is a lot. You might be thinking 50 is a little. It feels like a lot, but you know, maybe that's how they got the talent. And then the 3K quota, you might also be thinking that that's a lot. And I'll explain why it's not a lot. And we can go into that. So real quick though, if you take $3,000 and that's your quota, and you add $3,000 every month, what people don't realize is it bills every month, right? So like if you add $3,000 in January, it's still $3,000 in February, $3,000 in March, $3,000 in April, $3,000 in May, June. So a $3,000 quota, which sounds like a lot, and again, I'll break down why it isn't. It's a lot of money in the revenue. So like in first month, you basically made the company $3,000. In the second month, you made it $6,000. In the third month, you made it $9,000. You made it $12,000. So listen to this, dude. So by the end of the year, you're billing $36,000 a month. A month. Okay? So that means in November, you billed $33,000 a month. So that means if you add up all these numbers, this is the billings per month, right? This isn't stacking up. So what I mean by that is, if I bill $3,000 a month, that means 3 here, and I add another 3, that means we billed 6 this month, but we still billed the 3 this month. So then we billed $9,000 this month, and then billed $9,000 this month. By the end, you're billing $36,000 a month. If you add up all of the previous month's billing, you literally put $234,000 in revenue on the books by the end of the year. So a lot of people look at 36 and they're like, oh, that's just $36,000 a year. Like that's great, but it doesn't cover the base. No. You got to backlog the other months that have recognized revenue. So if I'm looking at the P&L as like the CFO, each sales rep that I pay $50,000 with a $3,000 quota is in that, let's say they hit it. Now, not everyone's going to hit it, but some will overachieve it. Some will underachieve it. That sales rep is adding almost $250,000 in revenue on the books. All right. That's insane. Here's the other part that's insane. When I was working at Vonage, I actually never sold a contract under 3 years. So which means there's $700,000 in recognized revenue on the books. So 230 is like actually on the books, like shows up in the P&L. But if you were to sell the company, you can sell at higher multiples because you have another 2 years of recognized revenue that can come through. So since you're selling 3-year contract, for example, if I was to sell the company, you can sell that one rep's revenue at $700,000 instead of that $250,000. And the reason for that is that's real revenue that you're going to collect over the next 3 years. Now, obviously there's some potential cancellations, but if somebody wouldn't buy it at the 700,000, you could honestly sell the contracts to a financing arm who might give you 80% of that and get 500 grand up front. So this is a big deal. Like $3,000 a month equals 700,000 on the books. Now here's the other insane part. If this rep quits or is fired, you're still billing $36,000 a month. Like, imagine how this stacks where you have this guy for 1 year. By the end of 2 years, like, this multiple is insane. By the end of 3 years, it's even more insane. Like, if that rep keeps going, I mean, this is like astronomical stacking. Okay. So like, that's how Vonage would pay us. It was 50 grand base salary quota. I think the quota, when I started was $3,000. It ended up dropping down to 2,500. And this is a table that can be manipulated. So 2,500, that's still 200,000 on the books. And the reason it dropped down is when I started, I actually worked for a company called Telesphere before they were acquired to Vonage. And Telesphere never sold phones without selling the internet. So Telesphere was like everyone at some point who was early on in VoIP. There was legit only T1s. And like sending VoIP traffic over T1s was terrible. And so what we would do at Telesphere, and one of the genius reasons why Vonage acquired them, is they would sell the internet with the phones, even if they already had internet, because we didn't want them to churn. So what happened was Telesphere had been in business long enough where they tried to sell VoIP over the top, and it straight up people would churn out because they'd say the voice quality was bad. Well, that wasn't because of Telesphere's fault. It was because of their back end network. It was because of the internet quality of the last mile. So what we would do is come in and sell a dedicated T1 on an MPLS network that was managed by Telesphere. It was like the most insane over-engineered thing I'd ever seen. But this was pre-internet, like being good days. So what we would do is we'd go in, we'd sell a dedicated T1 or more. I know that sounds crazy because it's 1.5 megs, but we would also sell like bundles, or like basically we would come in with some sort of dedicated service for the internet. And then what ended up happening was when you do something like that, a lot of you guys probably get it, right? It's like when you come in and do something like that, the local IT guy can't manage an MPLS in IT. So then what we'd put in is a managed firewall. And then by default, Telesphere would end up managing their existing internet from whatever carrier they had. And then we'd also end up managing the T1. So that way we could guarantee QoS. And by default ended up becoming a little bit of an MSP. And that's how Telesphere grew huge. That's also why we were able to sell $3,000 deals. So a lot of a month, each month with a quota like that. So what's interesting is like if you look at $3,000 a month and you divide it by, or let's divide it by like a $25 seat price. You know what I'm saying? You'd have to sell 120 seats a month. Is that right? So let's say 3,000 divided by $25. Yeah, 120 seats a month. That is kind of a lot. I mean, you're picking up a lot of 100 seat. You'd have to basically only go for 2 to 1 or like 3 deals a month, which is kind of a lot. So what we would end up doing is selling 1,500 of that as dedicated internet, and then 1,500 of that would be the seats. So if you did, $1,500, and then you divided this by $25 to $30, you're selling 60 seats a month. That's pretty attainable. And then actually, if they have multiple locations and you're selling a multiple location MPLS, really attainable, right? So you could sell one deal and hit that $3,000 a month because, we were actually selling a back end MPLS that we owned and managed. So the $3,000, as scary as it is right now, was actually really attainable for us because we basically knew that if we went after multi-location deals, no matter the seat size, we could hit that $3,000 a month. And then if we could decrease their existing internet price, sometimes we could sell 2 internet circuits to a 1 location deal because we required that DI or that dedicated circuit. So we'd sell DIA, then a back end MPLS, and then seats, and we were hitting $3,000 a month easy. I know that sounds crazy, but you guys, if you're watching this, take that down as a note. If you sell the internet with it, you're in a good place. If you sell internet and fail over with it, you're in a better place. If you sell internet, fail over, and you sell managed services, even before you get to the seats, that $3,000 a month number isn't so intimidating. Especially if you're going for smaller deals, this is a good way to get to that $3,000 a month, because they probably don't have an IT person on staff to manage all of the infrastructure that you're bringing in. So the managed services layer on top of that was a huge win for us. I want to do a quick shout out to Dave at BTI, because he was the one that basically said, how do the big dogs, this is quoting his email, it says, how do the big dogs pay their sales staff? And this is how they would do it, So I wanted to record this quick video breaking down for you. By the time I left Vonage, I think I had like a $4,000 or $5,000 a month quota and was making like 70 something, I think it was. And so at that point, you end up just going for bigger deals and bigger logos. So it's pretty easy to hit these numbers. I think anyone should go after this. But again, I say it's easy in the sense that you're doing what Telesphere did. The reason that the quota dropped later on as we went on is Vonage realized that they didn't want to make money off of the MPLS, and they didn't want to make money off of managed services, and they didn't want to make money off of the internet either. So what we ended up doing when I was working at Vonage in the later years is actually removing the managed services piece, and we removed selling the internet, because it's a publicly traded company, and when you go into the books, if you're a shareholder, you actually don't want to see like a third of the revenue coming from resold internet services through like Time Warner or stuff like that. It's kind of low margin stuff. But the high margin stuff, which was the pure VoIP sales, that's where we killed it. And then obviously we got to a point in the world where internet was fast enough where you didn't need to do a backhaul of that environment. We also ended up getting MPLS, or not MPLS, SD-WAN as an offering. So that kind of removed the need for the MPLS and the DIA as well. So as it went on, we actually weren't able to sell as much internet, and we still had the ability to sell the internet. We just weren't paid on it the same, so it became less appealing. Pretty creative on the Vonage team's part. You can really control how a sales team operates based on the commission structure. To break down that commission structure real quick before I jump off the video, if you sold $3,000, you were paid 1 times MRR. So let's just say 1x. So if you sold this $3,000, you would get paid $3,000 in commission. If you sold over $3,000, you would get a multiple. So like, let's say you sold $6,000, you would actually be paid maybe a 2x multiple on that. So you'd be paid $12,000. So again, really genius on Vonage's part, because they're giving up 1 month's revenue when they're still going to get the rest of this as they move on. So as far as the commission goes with Vonage, the quota was $3,000. If I sold $3,000, I got $3,000. If I sold, $6,000, I got $12,000 because of a multiple, which was basically 2 months revenue, and so that's how they would operate. Base of 50, and then multiples and bonuses based on if you hit your quota or not. There was also decelerators in there. So like if you didn't hit $3,000, you would get like 0.9 or 0.8 of your quota. So let's say if, this is the number, and I sold less, then I would get, 0.8. What did I do wrong there? This times 0.8. Yeah, you'd get 2,400. So there was accelerators and decelerators. It was all based around whatever you want that quota to be. I think if I'm you and I'm trying to build that quota, you've got to base it off of real numbers. So obviously, like if I am your CFO and somebody pitched me this, I said, yeah, I'll do this every day and twice on Sunday. But what I'd encourage you to do is build something that's actually attainable for your business. If you don't sell internet and you only sell VoIP, look at what somebody's done in, like, let's say the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Create a rolling average of that. It might be 1,000. It might be 2,000. It could be 3,000 or more. If you sell auxiliary services, right? So like if you're just selling VoIP, it's probably lower. If you're selling managed services and wholesaling the internet, and then SD-WAN, and then maybe some DIA or MPLS, or even dark fiber, then I think this $3,000 is easily attainable. So I just wanted to record this video so everyone can understand how Vonage would pay their sales team. It might give you some ideas on how to pay your sales team. The key thing here is a couple of other points I want to point out is there was a ramp. So if you came out of training the first month, we didn't expect you to just close $3,000. What we did expect you to do is like start working on a book of business. So most deals, are going to not close in 30 days or less. You got to kind of finesse the system. So it might start at like a 6-month ramp or a 3-month ramp. So you would start at like a low number and work your way up. And then if you didn't hit, so we wouldn't fire anyone in their ramp, but after they went live, if they didn't start hitting their quota in like the first 3 months, what we would do is we'd put them on a plan. We called it a PIP, performance improvement plan, I think it was. And then what would happen is if they didn't hit a certain percentage, it didn't have to be the full number of their quota. We would say, listen, you've got 3 months to start getting to your quota. If not, it's just not going to work out. And so that would be kind of like an 8-month period. And so it's really up to you on how you guys want to handle that. I will say, like, it really is based on the person, right? Because we would churn out a lot of employees at Vonage, and this was the early days, so I'm not saying copy the system. I think they learned over 5 years that this wasn't a good business model in the sense of hiring and firing, because we would churn through half of the sales team. Like, I would have a new person sitting next to me like every 6 months. And so like the good ones stayed and excelled. The bad ones would basically take a job. They would get through training. They would get through the first 6 months. And then what would happen was they would get on the plan. And 2 things happen when they get on the plan. A lot of people, when they're put on a plan, never make their way out of the plan. What happens is they start applying at other jobs, and in the next 3 months they end up finding another job before the plan expires and they got fired. And what was funny about that is people would snipe the Vonage employees because they just went through all the training. So they would end up going to like Consolidated or like some sort of master agent to do channel sales or something like that, knowing all of the lingo and technology in the industry. So that was the Vonage plan. The problem was they were paying for training for a lot of other people to spin out, because I think what ended up happening was someone up top looked at this number and they're like, if this is true, I'll hire 10,000s of the, like, how many reps do you got to hire? Like, and at one point I know we had like 150 reps across the country. And I think if you go into Vonage right now, it's probably a third of that. I bet you they got 50 reps or even less. And they've kind of twisted to focus more on the channel. So I'm not saying it works, but when you get it to work with like the ones that, can stick around, then you're in good shape. I will say, like, I don't like this business model for most businesses. What I mean by that is I think if you adjusted the quota where it's attainable for your sales rep, then it's a great business model. I think Vonage was like, if we don't get this number, then we got to let them go. And it was just like churn and burn. And since then, they don't do that anymore. So with that being said, this is how Vonage did it. I think you can do this pretty similar to the same. Maybe don't go for that 3,000 quota. Maybe go for like a 2,000 quota. Boom. And you're still putting, what is that? You're still putting 150 grand on a month. Or by the end of the year, if you sign 3-year contracts, you're putting just under $500,000 on the books. And then obviously if that person leaves, like, you're still killing it because you're still billing $24,000 a month. So I would encourage anyone to hire a direct sales team and give it a try. But also don't set them up for failure. The other part that I will point out is Vonage had a lot of marketing. So even if they weren't shoveling us leads, if I knocked on a door and said I was with Vonage, like had a really good opportunity of getting in, versus if I said A, B, C, D, or E company, right? Because it was a recognizable logo. I know there's a difference there, as sad as that sounds, because I worked for a company called AMPI that later sold to Voyant and Inteliquent. And I actually still have some friends that are over at Voyant and Inteliquent. And it was much harder to sell for AMPI than it was for Vonage, for obvious reasons. So this is how Vonage paid their customers. I hope this made sense to you. I'm not really sure how it helps you, but it should open up the doors on kind of the inner workings of what the big guys are doing. Alrighty, if you have any questions, shoot me an email, spencer@hellomedian.com. You can join our Slack channel. If you're not in our Slack channel, shoot me an email. There's a link in my bio, or there's a link in my signature that'll ask you to join the Slack channel and sign up for a loop. All right, thanks.